Students, welcome to the day 2 of the Python development workshop. So, yesterday we looked upon the ID setup and the environment that is provided to a system for the running of the Python programs. Then we went to the variables session where we see what are variables, what are the rules to define a variable. Then we saw some of the conditional statements in Python to write our conditions in the program. Then we went to the uh, functions and other parts. In today's session, we'll go with the loops. Then we'll go with another data type in Python known as list. Then we'll move ahead with the string. So let me start and present my screen to all of you. Okay, so loops in Python. Basically, from the word loop, what you guys understand? Okay, so the word loop in Python is basically used to repeat a particular task either till the condition is true, or you have to repeat the task n number of times. So in Python, loops are used to execute a block of code repeatedly. That means you have to execute that particular block of code number of times. Then Python provides two types of loops, that is for loop and while loop. For loop is basically an iterative loop, whereas the while loop is a conditional loop. That means this loop will work until a particular condition is true. Where in the for loop, the loop will run n number of times. Then we have loops reduce code repetition and makes program efficient. That means you do not have to write that particular task again and again, which again reduces your power and program efficiency. Now we'll see for loop. So a for loop in Python is used to iterate over a sequence. That means it can be a list, tuple, string, etc. So as you guys know that there are various data types in Python, right? The one data type in Python it could be an integer, float, character, string, etc. But similarly, we also have the data types such as list, tuple, strings, dictionary, which stores a sequence. Now, to iterate over this sequence, we basically have the for loop. That means one of the basic usage of for loop is to iterate over a sequence such as list, tuple, string, etc. Then we have the syntax. The syntax for the for loop is we have a for keyword, then item is basically again a iterable variable here. In is a keyword. Sequence is the name of the list, tuple, anything or dictionary. Then we have a code. Suppose if we take this as an example, here for is a keyword, and is num is our iterable variable. In is again an operate keyword here. 1, 2, 3 is again a sequence. So this for loop will iterate over this sequence and will print the each data entry inside it. Now coming on to the while loop. The while loop in Python is basically a conditional loop. That means this loop will work until a condition is true. As soon as the condition goes false, we will call off the loop. The syntax for the while loop is while, there's a keyword here, then we have the condition defined for this loop. Now we have a block of statements that we need to proceed, then the condition is true. So if you take the example, we have the count equal to 1 while count is less than or equal to 3, print count. Now in this piece of code, as you can see, this count will always remain 1 since there is no statement that is going to increase or decrease the value of the count. So this count is basically going to remain 1 only. And this condition is also going to be remain true. Ultimately, this count variable will be printed till this condition will become true. This condition is always true. So this count will keep on printing. This count will keep on printing. That means it will be an infinite loop. This is wrong. You should never have such uh, a statements or something that it creates an infinite loop. This is ultimately going to decrease your system's efficiency and it is considered to be unethical. Now we have the loop control statements. There are statements that are used inside the loop to control its execution. For example, break. It will exit the loop prematurely. That means whenever if you use the word break, the loop will exit. The loop will be called off. Continue means it is going to skip your current iteration and will continue with the next iteration. Similarly, pass does nothing. It is just as a used as a placeholder. That means it does nothing. It is, for example, we have a for loop here. For num is an iterable variable, enum is again range 5. This range 5 function is basically going to have the values 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The range function is going to have the value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it is a sequence that basically contains number 0 to 4. Now there is a condition inside a for loop. Whenever your num iterable variable has the value 3, you have to break. There will be a break. That means there only the loop execution will be stopped and the program execution will be called off after outside the loop. Now we have the nested loops. Yesterday we talked about the nested conditional statement. That means we have the conditional statements if and else inside another if and else. Similarly, in case of nested loops, we have the loops inside a loop. A loop inside another loop is known as nested loop. It is basically used for working with the multi-dimensional data. So this loop has the value in the sequence 0, 1 and 2. This second loop will have the value in 0, 1. Okay, so this loop will run 3 times and this loop will run 2 times. For each value of I, we have the loop j running 2 times. So for the three values of I, will have 3 into 2, 6 times this whole program or this whole nested loop will run to print your desired output. Now this is a very special case in a loop where we use the conditional statement else with the loop. So the else block runs if the loop completes normally. That means if the loop is completed as per it has to be, the else block will run. For example, for num in range 3, print num. Else print loop completed. So here in this piece of code, what you can say that here the sequence is from 0, 1 and 2. This will print all the values 0, 1 and 2. Whenever this loop will be called off, that means this it will iterate over all the values, then this else part will be executed and your loop completed statement will be printed on the screen. Okay, so students, before moving ahead with the examples and some practical sessions, may okay, okay, did you understand what are loops and what are while loops, for loop? We'll have some more basic and practice session where we'll get more familiar with the loops, but this theory part is clear to everybody. May I have some may I have some thumbs up or something in the chat session, please? Okay, okay, so you guys got okay and scan everybody. Okay, we'll start with the practical session then. Okay, so let's start with the while loop first. So while loop is used to execute a block of statement repeatedly until a given condition is satisfied. Until a given condition is satisfied. When a condition becomes false, the line immediately after the loop in program is executed. Okay, so just let's write the syntax. Okay, I'll write here only. We'll have the while keyword, and then we'll have the condition here. Then we'll have the statements here, and then we have. So this is basically the syntax for a while loop. Suppose if you have a variable count, let's take an example, and it has the value 0, okay, initially. Now I'll use the while loop to execute my task until my count value becomes 3, okay. So count is equal to count plus 1, and we'll just print hello. Okay, so before running this code, okay, let's run this code. Can somebody possibly tell me how many times this while loop will run? Okay, so yeah, let me show. Okay, 3 times. Yeah, for the very first count, we have the value 0. This condition is satisfied. Now the count value is increased by 1. That means count value becomes 1, and this hello will be printed. Similarly, it goes on till the count value reaches 2. As soon as the count value reaches 3, 3 greater than 3 is not true. It is a false statement. Hence, this while loop will not be executed. Now, let's see how you can use an else. You can use the else statement with while loop. Python, okay. So the else clause is only executed when the while loop condition becomes false. Okay, so there is one point to be noted that so if you break out of the loop, if we break out of the loop, or if an exception is raised, it won't be executed. That means only when your condition inside the while loop will become false, then only this else clause will be executed, else this else clause will not be executed. And hence, if there is any break statement or there is an exception raised, your else block won't be executed. Okay, done. So let me write a piece of code, and should I write the syntax also? Okay, I'll write only here. Okay, syntax. Then we have a while, we have a condition here, we have a statement here, then we have the else. Since else does not come with any condition, we'll just have a simple statement. Okay, so this was about the syntax. Now I'll just have an example regarding this. Let's take an initial example where we'll have the count value as 0. Then we have a while loop which says while count is less than 3, we'll just increase the value of count by 1. Okay, and we'll print hello. Okay, now we'll simply write else here, else will print, we'll write an else block. Okay, before running this, or I'll run this and it makes. Okay, so why this else block was executed, or why it shouldn't be executed? This else block was executed because the while loop condition becomes false when the count of value has got the value 3. Okay, let's just write again an example where I'll just have this initial example only. We'll have the count value as 0. Then we have a while loop and we'll write count greater than 3. So count value is less than 3, then we'll just print count. Okay, can somebody see what's the error or the bug inside this code, or is there an error or there is no error, this code is perfectly fine? Can somebody tell me about this code? What is the issue with this code? Or there's no error, this code is perfectly fine, there is an exception, anything you would like to share? Yes, so students, this is an infinite loop. This infinite loop is basically your count value is always going to remain 0. So this count is less than 3 is always going to get satisfied. Since it is always going to get satisfied, there is no meaning of this condition. It is going that this count is going to remain the same. This code, this while loop will continue to run, and this is going to come into an infinite loop. Okay, for just for the sake of just for the sake of your remembrance, I'll write here not it is not suggested to use the infinite loops type of loops, as it is a never ending loop. Where the condition is always true. True. And you have to forcefully terminate the compiler. So it is not suggested to use these types of loops where the condition always going to remain true, and you forcefully have to terminate the session. Okay. Now we'll have a look at the for loop. For loops are used. These are sequential loops basically. For example, traversing a list or string or an array, etc. Now we'll just see the syntax. Syntax. These are the for. We will have iterable variable. In sequence statements we have okay. It can be used. This for loop can be used to iterate over a range and iterators. Okay, so if let's have a variable n which has the value 4, then we have a for loop. I is an iterable variable in range 0 to n, let's say. If I'll type print I. Okay, so I has the value 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Simply, if you remove this 0 from here, if you write m, then also it's going to remain the same. So the range function is basically going to have the value, if it is written range n, then the values will be from 0 to n minus 1. If it is written from range n1 to n2, that means from n1, the values will be from n1 to n2 minus 1, where the step size is 1. If the step size is changing, then there will be breaks accordingly. Okay. Now we'll see the iteration in the various sequences. Now we can also use the index of the elements in the sequence to iterate over them. Okay. Suppose if you have a list that has the values hello Python learn. Okay. Then we have a for loop for I in list. Print I. All the elements are now printed. Now if I copy this code, if I write if I add the range function here, for range we should have the numerical value. Now we'll have the len function. Len function is basically going to return the total length of the list. Okay. So similarly, this also gives us the element inside a list. Now we'll see how you can use the else with the list. Now I'll just use the else block here. Okay, so this was the usage of else block in the for loop. Now we'll see nested loops in Python. So, uh, Python allows you to have a loop inside a loop. Let's see a sentence for the nested loops. For we have iterable variable here. In sequence, and then we'll have then we will again have the iterable variable for loop inside a for loop. So this was the syntax for the nested for loop. Okay. Now we'll see the syntax for the nested while loop. While we'll have the expression here, or you can simply say condition even. Okay. We'll have the while condition. Then we'll again have a condition inside a while loop. Then probably we're going to have statements. So this is the syntax for the while loop. Okay. So there is a suppose I'll give you an example on the nested for loop. If I write a for loop that has the iterable one variable as I in range 1 to 5. Okay. Now if I have the second for loop inside this ith loop, let's say it has the iterable variable as j and it has in range 1. Let's not take it as 1, let's make it a little complicated. Okay, we'll take I. Jump. Now if I have the print statement, print I. Okay, comma, let's have and is equal to 0 just to have the spacing. Okay, now here I'll simply have the print to have space after every ith loop. Okay. Now before running this piece of code, can somebody like predict the output? Can somebody in the chat section can just you can you give me the hint for this output? What is going to be the output? This ith value, this first for loop will going to have the value from 1 to 4. This 5 will not be executed. This j will run every for every range I. That means for range 0, it is going to have the range 0 function. For I value to be 1, it is going to have the range 1 function. Similarly, it is going to be keep on going. Can somebody please predict the output here? Okay, is somebody okay? Ashish, let's run this and we'll see what's the output, I guess. But it's good that you have at least tried. No, the output is this. So for the very first value of I, which is 1, we have the range 0, 1, 0 only. So this 1 is going to be get printed. For the value of I to be 2, this range function is going to be 2. And this value of I is going to remain same. This is not going to print the jth value. This is going to only print the ith value. So this there will be 2, 2. Similarly, we are for the I value 3, it is going to print the 3. Similarly, it is going to keep on till we reach the value 4 for I. Everyone got it? Somebody please acknowledge it. Did you got the output? How it has came? Okay. Now we will go ahead with the loop control statements. So loop control statements change the execution or the flow of the program from the normal sequence. When execution leaves the scope, all automatic objects that were created in that scope are destroyed. And Python supports the following control statements, that are break statements, continue statement, and pass statements. We'll closely look to each and every statement one by one with the example. Okay, so first of all, we'll have the continue statement. Okay, it's not control, it's continue. So this statement, the continue statement, and returns the control to the beginning of the loop. Let's see it with an example. For I in, let's say, for I, let's say we have a sequence, that's Python. Okay. Then we have a if condition where if I is equal to py. Okay. Continue. We have a continue keyword here. else print letter is I. Okay. Okay, we cannot use two word letters. Okay, bye. So what it is done here basically, here in this piece of code, the I has got the value p. This condition was false, then it has printed. Now, when the I becomes y, this condition was true and it was sent back. This actually skips the current iteration and the next iterations are executed. So for the letter y, we do not have the y letter is y printed. Else for other letters, we got the letter to be printed. Now we have the break statement. Brings control out of the loop. Okay, let's see an example. So we'll just have this similar program here for I in Python if letter equal to y. Okay, we'll just have a break statement. Else will print letter is I. Let's run this. Okay. So it has only run for the iteration where the letter matches the if condition. Okay, so for only y it was printed. Now we'll see the pass statement. So the pass statement in Python is used to write the empty loops. Okay, we'll take the similar example for I in Python if I is equal to okay, let's not write this function, simply write pass here and we'll have the print statement. Print letter is. Okay, so the letter is n. That means for every value of I it has run. When the loop has stopped, the last variable it was carrying, the last value of I is now printed here. So this was all about the loops we have studied. Let's take a quick revision over to this. So basically in Python we have loops to execute a task repeatedly. We have two types of loops in Python, while loop and for loop. While loop is a conditional loop, while for loop is a sequential loop. Loops these are basically used to reduce the code repetition and make the programs efficient. For loops in Python used to iterate over a sequence such as tuples, dictionary lists, strings, etc. This is the syntax for the loop. Then we saw a little example for the for loop. And then comes the while loop, which is a conditional loop. That means this loop will continue till the condition is true. Then we saw the special example of an infinite loop. Why should we avoid doing it? Then we saw the loop control statements, which are break, continue, and pass. Break exits the loop prematurely, while continue skips the current iteration and continues. Pass is just nothing, it is used as a placeholder, basically used to create infinite, basically used to create the empty loops. Then we saw the nested loops, which are basically used for multi-dimensional data. Then we saw how else clause work with the loop. Here we have the practical over to the while loop first of all. Then we saw while loop with the else block. Then we saw a special example of infinite loop, which we should avoid because it is not suggested to use this type of loop, as it is never ending loop where the condition is always true and you have to forcefully terminate the compiler. Then we saw the for loop. We saw the we saw how you can iterate over a list in for loop using for loop. And then we saw nested loops syntax for both for while loop and for loop. Then we saw an example of an nested for loop. Then we saw the loop control statement. First we saw the continue, where we saw that only the current iteration is skipped and else all the iteration following it will be executed. Then the break statement, we saw that it prematurely exits the loop and come out of it. Pass statement is basically used to create the empty loop. That means it does not have a physical significance there. It is just used to keep on working with the loops. So uh, both break statement and the continue statements affects the number of iterations in the for loop, whereas in pass control statement it does not have such any significance there. This was all about the loops. Okay. Yes, continue will just skip to the current iteration. That means in which iteration the continue was be followed or the condition below it was be like true, only that iteration will be skipped. Else all the iteration that will be after it will be executed. Break will stop when the I value gets Y. Yeah. Whenever it will find that the value of I reaches the Y, it will come out of the loop. Why I only? Why not P? Where? Okay, here I is not anything. It is I is an iterable variable. When I is equals to P, then it will break. Yeah, it will break. Since P is there inside a string, na. Here we have put it condition I is equal to Y, then I is equal to, then will be stop when we use the break after the condition is true. I don't understand what do you mean to say here. Like here we put it the condition I is equal to Y, then the I is equal to Y, then it will stop. Since see I is an iterable variable here, and in our string Python Y is there, so this condition is going to get true. For the continuous statements, if there is I Y, it is just going to skip that iteration in which it has got the value y. For the break statement, it is going to come out of the loop, means no iteration will be continue after it. But in case of the continue statements, the after the y, all the remaining iterations will be carried forward. Did you understand that? Actually, I don't understand this G1 creations. Uh, your actually I don't understand the query here, but I just mean to say that in a continuous statement, only your current iteration is skipped. That means whenever you have the value of I as y, when it will be matched, then only it will be coming out of the loop. Else, it will be continue with the rest of the iterations in case of continuous statement. Okay, okay, nice. So, is there any other doubt, guys? Please show up as we'll take this loop till 5, then we'll continue with the list. Please write your doubts if you have any. Also, any doubt from the previous session? Okay, so till loops, variables, conditional statements. Actually, students, this is a very basic concept of any programming language. Conditional statements, your loops, your variables form the foundation of any programming language. If you have any doubt till today, you can ask. We can like have some 5 to 6 minute session for this doubt. Else, I will proceed with the list. Since list will take time and it is a big topic and we need to discuss it thoroughly also. This no ma'am is for what? I don't understand. Okay guys, if you have understood the loops and everything, we'll move ahead with the list now. So coming on to the list. So what do you understand by list if anybody has the idea before? What do you understand by list, guys? Nobody knows list. Okay, so basically, the list in Python is a type of a data type in which you store all types of data like an integer, float, string, boolean, etc. That means you can store a combination of all of them, or you can have a single list of where we can only have integer values, where we only have float values, that way. Now, list is a mutable type. That means you can like change the elements inside a list, modify the elements when they are created, that way. Then now we have the list. That list is orderable. That means list has a particular order. That means it has an index, and it can contain the duplicate data. See, these are some of the features, and you need to keep in mind once you are looking to it. Okay, so you can access the items in a list using the index, which starts from 0 to n minus 1. Here n is the total number of elements or items present inside the list. We can use the list constructor, which can be used to create an empty list. Now there are different ways to create a list. We have You can simply create a list using the two square brackets which does don't have anything inside. Then we can either create it using elements inside it, or you can simply use a list constructor to have it. Now here, if I see if I see here that here my list one is equals to my list, that means the elements that were present inside the my list are now copied to the my list one, that, or you can say both my list and my list one are pointing to the same object. Now, suppose if we have a list that have the students 1 comma Amit, 2 comma Akhil, 3 comma Preeti, 4 comma Shoaib. So these 1 comma Amit is itself a list. Similarly, 2 comma Akhil, 3 comma Preeti, and 4 comma Shoaib. Now these lists are present inside a big list or a parent list which has these four child lists inside it. Okay. Now we will iterate on the list using the loop for better than while. Okay, so it is saying here that for loop is better to like it's better to use it if you're iterating over the list in the loop rather than the while loop, because while loop will provide a condition. You need to have a proper condition defined. So for better cause you can always have the for loop there. Now use enumerate iterable function to iterate on a collection of index. That means you can have this enumerate function to iterate on collection with index. Now we will have this list functions. The len function is going to return the count of elements that are present inside a list. List.append will particularly add the element at the very last position. Now mylist.extend is going to extend this list at the very last position of the list. That means this 22 comma 33 small list will be appended at the very last position. Okay, now we will see mylist.count 3. So it is basically going to count the occurrence of the 3 in the list. mylist.pop 0 is going to remove the element 0. So mylist.pop is going to remove the element from at given index. Now mylist.remove is going to remove the item from a list. Mylist, mylist.reserve is going to reverse the list. So it's not reserve, it's basically reverse the list items in the same list. Now, if we have a mylist 1, 2, and 3, let's say for example, mylist.clear is going to clear the list. This mylist is going to become the empty list after. Del keyword is basically used for deletion. So mylist start, end, and increment, that is basically going to give you start, end, and the step size for all values that you want to delete. Del list mylist will completely delete the list. Mylist dot insert is going to insert this word hello at the position that is one given here. Mylist dot sort is will going to sort your list in the ascending order, but if you provide the argument reverse is equal to true, it is going to like reverse provide you the list in the descending order. Now my list dot sort key is equals to length, that means it is going to sort the strings item based on the length, that is length is a function here. It can be maximum, minimum, or anything else. Okay, so this list comprehension and other things we'll see later. Let's go to the list functions for the practical session maybe. Okay, so first we'll see the how you can create a list. So lists are ordered, mutable collection in Python, and they can store elements of different data types. Okay. Suppose if I have the my list, list, let's simply write 1, comma 2, comma 3, comma 4, comma 5. Okay. And I will just print my list is simply write lst. So it's saying that my list is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Now see how you can create an empty list. can also create an empty list and add the elements later on. Well, okay, I'll simply use the append function to append the elements. We'll have the obtain and append function. We'll have this too. Okay, I'll just print this empty list. Okay, so this empty list has the elements now 1 and 2. Now I'll see how you can use the print. You can print a list. We'll use the print function to display the elements of a list. Okay, so we'll use the print function to display the elements of a list. We'll simply write print the elements of a list are just print. Suppose it's just a list. Okay, I will just put for both the list also. We'll write empty list. Okay, so the elements for both the list are now printed. Now you'll see how you can how to print the elements of a list separately. Suppose if I write for I in list, print I. Oh, for I. Okay, so the elements that are there inside the LST are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and hence the elements are printed one after the other. Okay, now we'll see how you can do indexing inside a list. So, so the indexing basically is an index. Indexing in a list is basically the indexes that is provided to each and every element of a list. The very first element has got the index 0, and the very last element has got the index n minus 1. This n minus 1 here, n is the total number of items that were there inside a list. If you're coming from the back, then the last value will have the index minus 1, and then sequentially it is going to get increased by 1. Now we'll see an example of it. Suppose if you have a LST list which has the elements 10, comma 20, comma 30. Okay, let's use the for loop for I in LST print. To have the index of, use the index. We'll use the index function where I is our iterable variable, so we'll simply write index. Okay, so here is going to basically going to have the index. Suppose if you want to have write the very have the want to have the very first value, we'll write I0. Similarly, for the very last element, we'll write print. So let's remove this for loop here, then it has no sense now. Okay, we'll write print. So for the very last element, we have the index as -1 or n minus 1. So we'll keep -1 and we'll print. Before we just going to have the LST here. LST. Similarly, I'm going to have the LST. Okay. So the very first element is 10 and the very last element is 50 here. So this was the indexing. Now we'll see slicing. So we're going to see the slicing in a list. Slicing in a list is basically meaning to select a portion of a list. Okay, when you want to have a portion of a list, then we use the slicing. Suppose if you want to have the first three elements, then we'll write, suppose we have a LST here as 1, comma 2, comma 3, comma 4, comma 5. Okay. Now, suppose if you want to have the very first three elements, so the first three elements are right LST colon and 3. So this is going to print the very first three elements of the list. Okay, the very first three elements of the list are 1, 2, and 3. Suppose if we go with the, now we'll see the len function. The len function, okay. So if I write print the total items inside a list, comma len lst. Okay, so the total elements inside a list are 5. This was the len function. Len function basically returns the number of elements that are present inside a list. Now we'll see lists containing different data types. So list can hold values of different data types such as integers, strings, float, etc. Even we can have a list inside a list. Okay, let's see an example. If we have a list as 1 comma 3.14 comma python comma true. Okay, so this is our list basically. Let's print this. Okay, so the list has the value 1 3.14, which is the value of pi. Then we have the cast string as python and a boolean value as true. Okay, now we'll see the nested list. Let's have a list here as 1 comma 2 comma 3 comma 4 5 comma 6. Okay, so the nested lists are lst. Okay, so the nested list is how to access the elements inside a nested list. If we write print lst 0. Okay, one will going to give you the second element. Similarly, if I write parent lst 2. For the last element, if I write print lst minus 1. Let's run. So the second element is our 2. It has given that. Last element is 6, and the third element, which is with the index 2, is 3 4. Now how you can access this 3 comma 4 separately. Let's see that. Okay, let's see. So this has given us the separate value that is 3 to us. Similarly, if I write rent lst 2 with 1, so it has given in the value 4 separately. So whenever you have the nested list, you just have to give the parent index first, and then the you have to follow the indexing again inside that list. Did you got that? Okay. Yeah, a list is a collection of elements. Yes, list is mutable, true. Like heterogeneous elements, and it is mutable, it allows duplicate elements. Yes. Order of sequence, yes, it is there is an order, it is a perfect indexing in the list. It supports indexing, yes, it supports zero based indexing. List is dynamic, we can use any number of elements without fixing size. Yeah. Could you explain list.extend how it works? Yes, we'll see it in the later part today only. Can you explain how list works if we have to? Can you explain how it works? List throughout. Okay, we'll use this. Okay, true. We'll use this. Yeah, it is yes. If you use the list double colon minus plus, it is going to reverse the list, because actually I was about to teach you this double colon minus one method in the reverse function only. Okay. Now we'll see the ID function. The function returns the let's see a code. Suppose if you have a variable if var, I have quite so to return the memory address, we'll simply write id of print id var. Okay, the address of the variable is now there. This id function is helpful for understanding how Python manages the memory for objects. This id function is basically how the Python efficiently makes use of the memory for the execution of the program. Now we'll see the concatenation of the. string. Okay. Before it, let's see some id function more functions. Suppose if you have a list, let's say, which has the value 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Now let's print id of this list. Okay. Now we'll do lst dot append, let's say 4 if I append. If I append the letter 4, and I'll now print the id of this. Let's see what is the changes made. Okay, so the changes are like address is still same and it is pointing to the same object even after you have appended the object. Okay. But since the list is mutable, let's see in the case of string. We'll see strings in detail, but let's just consider it as an example here. If you have a string Python here and you have to print string id string, okay. Now if I write string plus is equal to plus is equal to program, okay. Now if I check the print id of string, now listen this. Okay, since the string is not mutable, it is immutable type, and hence after once you modify it, it is going to point out in the different memory location. So this was the list. We'll see the list functions in detail in next few minutes. Let me know if there is any doubt till this. Students, do you have any problem in till this section of the list? It is correct for the reverse of list. Okay, let me show you what you're trying to say. Okay, I'll just have a list here first of all. 9, comma 2, comma 3. Okay. Then so this list double colon minus 1 is basically used to reverse a list. Yes, it is used for the reverse of the list. Can you explain how it works? LST this. Okay, I'll show you. It's basically going to have the first two elements. Okay. So this, okay, so how does this work? So basically the very first is your nothing. Like that means you should not have anything in between. Like starting point and end point is not defined. That means it is strict to the size of the list. This 2 is the step size. That means in this list the second element will be skipped out and the very first and the last element will be, or the, since this list is small we cannot say it much. Let's increase it more. Okay. Similarly, here in this list, double column 2 is that your starting point is going to be at the index 1 and your ending point is going to be at the very last of the list. Your step size is 2, that means After 1, that means after the index 0, you have to jump onto the index 2. After the index 2, you have to jump onto the index 4. Similarly, after the index 4, you have to jump onto the index 6. And this way it will keep going on. Okay, students, did you get that? Yes, actually, this 2 is basically for the step size. That means how at what rate did your index will change. If you don't have anything in your step size, that means if you just have one column 2, that means from index 1 to index 2 it will going on without any step. By default the step size is 1 only. Okay, now we'll go ahead with the list functions. Let's revise some of the list functions from here. So the list in list functions, list mylist dot clear will going to clear the elements inside a list. Del keyword is going to delete my list with the particular starting and ending point defined and your step size also defined. Del my list is basically going to delete your old list. My list dot insert is going to insert this hello at the index 1. My list dot sort is basically going to sort your list with argument reverse is equal to true is basically going to sort this in descending order. Here in this list functions we have length of my list defined. That means it is going to return the length, return the count of elements inside a list. We saw the length function today only. Append function is going to like add a single item in the existing list at the very last position. Similarly, extend function is also going to do the same. Extend, basic difference between append and extend is that for append only you can add one element. Similarly, for adding multiple elements you have to use the append. You have to use the append multiple number of times. But in case of the extend function, you can actually insert the list at the very last position. Mylist.count3 is going to count the occurrence of this element inside a list. Mylist.pop0 is going to delete the element at index 0. Mylist.remove is going to remove that particular item from the list. Mylist.reserve reverse is going to reverse the item in the same list. Reverse we also saw with the slicing. Now let's start. Now also how you can remove the elements from a list. Do you have any doubt still this? Okay. Also how removing elements from list. Suppose if you have a list A 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. So E dot remove 30, let's say. Now print A. So this 30 is now removed. Suppose if I use the pop function, a dot pop at the index 1, and we'll print this a. So it has removed the element at the index 1, which was 20. Okay. Suppose if I write del and a0, print a. So it has removed the very first element, that is 10. So this is the how you can remove elements from a list. If I write del a, and if I write print a, okay, name here a is not defined. And that's how you can delete an whole list. So here we saw how you can remove the elements from a list. That means you can use the dot remove function, and here the argument should be the element. Similarly, in dot pop function, the argument should be the index. Whereas in del keyword, the argument again should be the index. And then we saw how you can delete the complete list. Students, do you have any problem in this deletion part or removing any element from an array or anything till this point? Okay, what is the difference between lst dot remove 30, lst dot pop 2, and del lst 1? Okay, so dot lst dot remove 30 is basically going to delete the element 30. If there is an element, if there is an item which has the value 30 inside your list, it will be deleted. Lst dot pop 2 will going to delete the value that is at index 2, and del lst1 will going to delete the element or remove the element which is at the index 1. Oh, did you got that? Did you understand the G1 creations? Did you understand the difference between the remove dot pop and del keyword? This all is only for removing the element. Yes, this is only for removing the element. For like deleting the entire list, yeah, I told you you can simply use the del keyword and then followed by a list name. Okay, I guess it was clear now. Now we'll just see the iterating in a list. Okay, suppose if you have a list A, it has a value 10, comma, 20, comma, 30, comma. Now, suppose If you have to iterate for each value for I in LST, print I. Okay. Do that. Oh, sorry. I just have to give the name wrong name. Okay. So this is how you can iterate over a list. Now we'll see the sorting in a list. If I write sorted A, we dot sort print sorted array. Let's see. Okay. Why does not give? Let's define the A again. I don't know what's the problem with this. Just like a jumble one. 5, 21, 40, 6, 19. If I don't store it here, just simply write print A. Okay, so it has sort the list A in the ascending order. Now, if I simply copy this, and here I write reverse is equal to 2. Now this has printed our list in descending order. Now we'll see multi-dimensional list. Before let's do some other thing. We have a list 1 comma 2 comma 3. Okay. Then we have a function another list B. Let's see, we have 4 comma 5 comma 6. Okay. Let's we have see here we have a list A plus B. Let's print the C. So here this A plus B is going to give you the list that has the elements of both A and 1. A plus B means that first you're going to have the elements of A, then you're going to have the elements of B. Here the order matters. That means if you write, let's say D is equals to B plus A, print D, shift plus enter. Okay. So similarly going to have the elements of B first. Now let's see if you have a list that has all the numeric entries. Okay. Now I'll write res is a variable and we use the sum function. And I simply write sum lst, and if I'll print this res variable, so it has given us the summation of all the values that are there inside a list. Now I'll see how you can reverse a list. If I write lst dot reverse, I'll simply print this list. It has reversed our list. So suppose if our list has a value 5 comma 1 comma 5 comma 6. Okay. Now to remove the duplicate values, since we know that list support duplicate entries, and hence to remove the duplicate entries we have to have a, let's say we have a variable a. Now we'll convert your list to a set using this. Okay. Now we'll print a. Here what we have done was first we have converted our list lst to a set. When it is converted to a set, it has removed all the duplicate entities. Now we have converted that set again to a list, that is a. Now list set a is not callable. I guess there is some issue, but similarly you can work this. Okay. Now we will see how you can change the elements of a, like how you can interchange the elements inside here. Suppose if you have a list a is equal to 10 1 comma 2 comma 3 comma 4 comma 5. Okay. Suppose if you want to change we want to interchange the element with our at index 1 and 2. Sorry, very first and very last. So a minus 1, okay, is equal to a minus 1 comma a 0. Okay. Now let's print this a. So the very first and the last elements are not interchanged. This is basically the use of multiple assignment. Okay. Now you will see how you can have a nested list to create a multi-dimensional list. Suppose if you have a matrix 1, comma 2, comma 3, 4, comma 5, comma 6, 7, comma 8, comma 9. Okay, this is basically okay. So this is a multi-dimensional array. Suppose if you want to access the elements I told you, print. Okay, matrix. So this I told you earlier also. This is basically going to print the the second element of the first index sublist. Okay, let's see what this gives. 6. So At the index 1 we have 4 5 6, and in the 4 5 6 at the index 2 we have 6. Now let's see some of the append functions. How you can use the append here. If I write matrix dot append 10 comma 11 comma 12. Okay, let's print this also. So 10 11 12 are also appended. Okay, now we will see how you can use extend function. Suppose if I write matrix 0 dot extend 13 comma 14 comma 15. So this line, this will basically going to do, this is basically going to extend the list with 13 14 and 15 at the index 0th position. Let's print this. Okay, so at the index 0 we have the 1 2 3. Now 1 2 3 I have got the other members as 13 14 and 15. Now we'll see how you can reverse. Alright, matrix dot reverse. Okay, correct. So it has reversed the all elements. Now I'll show you other things. How you can write print matrix 0 dot reverse. Okay, let me just again take this. Maybe there's some issue. We have done a lot of operations in the history, so might be there's some issue. Okay. We'll just remove this print one first. Because we'll do the operation and then we will. That's okay. Now we'll simply print this matrix. Okay. So here we would have done this similar here. I guess then it will work. Just print this matrix. Okay. So it has reversed the elements. So matrix 0 dot reverse is going to reverse the at the elements at the index 0. Okay. Any questions till this? Remove list word. I don't understand you, Praveen. Can you please elaborate your query little much? You can change a list to a set for removing duplicate values. Yeah, in that way you can get, but listen, see, here result is equals to set A. That means you have taken your result ultimately to a set A. That data type is set still. If you want to convert it to a list again, since your parent data type was list, you have to convert it to it. So after you have completed your result to a set data type, now you have to convert your result set data type to a list data type. Any more doubts, guys? If there are no students, any more doubts? What about the attendance scenario, ma'am? That your attendance scenario will be taken up by the backend team. Okay, if you don't have any more queries, we'll end up the session here. Thank you for joining in.